Hi guys, welcome to Binge Watch Britney's. Today I am doing an episode on Real Housewives of New York, the reboot season 14, and I'm really super excited to be doing this episode because I know that there was a lot of talk or controversy about the reboot for New York just because everyone's familiar with and everyone loves the old cast, the legacy cast of Real Housewives of New York, and so now we just have this new group of people coming in. We have Uba, who's a model. We have Erin, who is kind of like this home designer, interior decorator, slash like real estate person. We have Shy, who's an influencer. We have Jenna, who is known for her fashion, for being a top figure, head figure at J. Crew. And then we have Jessel, who is also in the fashion industry, but I'm not quite sure what Jessel does exactly. And then we have Bryn, who is also under fire for whatever she does. I think she said that she's in consulting, and obviously you can go to her LinkedIn page and figure out what she actually does. So Bryn is in consulting, and she has mentioned that in the reunion, which we'll get to a little bit later. And so yeah, so that's everyone who is part of this new season for the Real Housewives of New York. And so let's get into the season itself. Everything I'm going to be talking about in this episode is things that I found intriguing or interesting about all of the episodes as they played, and so there may be some things that I'm not talking about that you may have found relevant, but these are just the things that just stood out to me. And so one other thing I want to point out while I am recording this episode is that I did get a new mic, and so I'm testing it out for this episode, and hopefully the sound quality is improved or is better. Being that I have a hearing loss, I can obviously listen to sound to see how it sounds in terms of loudness or things like just loudness, but I can't actually tell how it sounds in terms of quality, like is there static, is there echoing, that kind of thing. And so hopefully this mic makes a big difference. And yeah, let's go ahead and get into the episode. So the first thing that we really have as a conflict for this season is what I refer to as the cheese beef and the restaurant beef. And so the cheese beef is between Erin and Sai, and we basically have this retelling of a situation where Erin was having a get together and Sai wanted to know kind of what she was serving, and I guess she mentioned that she was serving cheese, wine and cheese, and so it became a thing where Sai was not happy with whatever Erin was serving, and so she was just always complaining about it. And so the point of the story was to show that Sai was complaining about the food that Erin served. And then we also have this restaurant beef between Erin and Bryn. So just to get this out of the way at the start of this episode, Bryn is very, very flirty, and everyone knows this about her. And you obviously see this personality of hers come out more throughout the rest of the season, in addition to her continuing to be her flirty self. And so we have this beef between Erin and Bryn because Erin wanted to have a get together and go to a specific restaurant. Sai and Bryn didn't want to go, and instead of not doing anything for the rest of the night, they went to a different restaurant, and Erin found out about it, and so she was upset about that because she basically felt like they just wanted to go to a particular restaurant for the status of being at that restaurant instead of spending time with the group and hanging out with their friends. And so that obviously created some beef that we will see play out through the rest of the season. Then the next thing that I thought was kind of really intriguing was Jenna's apartment. So she has a place in Soho, and she has her own elevator, which is really cool. And her closet is apparently to die for. She has a lot of space for her closet. I think I was reading somewhere, and maybe she even said it in the show, I can't really recall, but apparently she has 800 pairs of shoes, and then obviously she had a lot of designer stuff, expensive designer stuff in her closet. And so everyone was glad when they were able to come over to her house and they were able to play around in her closet. And I think it was Erin and maybe Bryn, or Erin and Sai, I can't recall who, but they were in Jenna's closet and they actually broke her chair or something like that. And it was just really funny how they were just playing around in her stuff and then they broke her chair and all of that. And so obviously with her working at J. Crew and with her being such a figurehead in the fashion industry, you would obviously expect her to have a lot of different styles and a lot of different items in her closet, and so that was just really cool to be able to see someone who is actually known for something on the show, if that makes sense, like known for something in terms of their career, and they're like really, really good at it. And so the next thing I want to talk about is the group's first kind of like real girls trip. We have Erin inviting everyone to her Hamptons house, and we have Sai, Jessel, and Uber, they are sharing a ride. They are in kind of like a SUV. They have a bunch of stuff. Sai has overpacked for this trip, and so there's just barely enough room for everyone's stuff. And while they're talking on the drive, Jessel reveals that she hasn't had intimacy in a year, and so they're just really shocked by that. She did recently have twins, but as you see throughout like the rest of the season, she's talking about how she had IVF procedures, how she went through 5 rounds of it, and just like the toll that that takes on your body, and also carrying twins and then giving birth and then having to raise twins and stuff like that. And then she also talked about how in Indian culture, it's kind of taboo if a woman can't have children, and so she was just kind of talking about how that created a lot of pressure for her in terms of being able to talk about that kind of stuff because she didn't want to be like the outcast or seen as weird or criticized or whatever for not being able to naturally have children. And so this was something that she talked about keeping from her mom. And obviously, with her being on the show, this would come out. Her mom would see her talking about all of this on TV. And so it was good that she was able to pull her mom aside and have this conversation on air since she was talking about all of this on air. And so anyway, they in the car they just basically share that her and Pavitt's haven't been intimate for a year, and the girls are just kind of like trying to dig more into that and like figure out what's really going on. But to be clear, Jessel didn't really go into like as much detail as I just went into, and so the girls don't really have the full picture of everything that's going on. And so now, with everyone at Erin's house, we're back to like the food issue. She is serving caviar, and so I think the girls called ahead to find out what she was serving. And once they figured out that it was caviar, they weren't happy. And so Uber and Sai they went to go to a grocery store called Provision, and they wanted to like buy their own food to bring it to the house so that they wouldn't be starving. Because they just want better food than what she's offering, and so obviously that played out as well in the show and kind of created some conflict as far as the girls not being appreciative of the efforts that Anne was going through in order to give them the food that she was giving them. The next thing that we have happening on this trip is we see Jenna. She's pulling up in her vintage Mustang. We know that she also has a house in the Hamptons. It's much smaller, but she has her own place that she can kind of like retreat to. And what we have is what we learned from this like situation is that she has her house in the Hamptons, and just before filming, her mom passed away, and so I think that she maybe hadn't been to that Hamptons house in a while, and so we just have different emotions going on for Jenna, in addition to this being like her first girls trip and just being around so much feminine energy and just dealing with all of that chaoticness that comes with being around a bunch of girls. And so obviously if she's never been on if she's never been on a girls trip, this is gonna be very like overwhelming for her, and I don't think that the girls really took that into account for her. In addition, she was also working, so she did have a lot going on. So this is also a moment where we see Jenna kind of giving out a lot of gifts. She brings lingerie for everyone. Everyone's outfits look really nice except for Jessel. So Jessel's outfit is one, it's really long, and then it's almost maybe 1 or 2 sizes too big, and then the color is just kind of like a weird green, and so just because of how it fits, Jessel is not really happy about it. She's complaining about it, and she's just being really rude to Aaron, and like the girls are kind of like offended by this. Obviously, Jenna is herself offended, but she's not the type of person who is very controversial, and so she's not really saying much. And so you really have Sai kind of going after Jessel when they sit down, I think either for lunch or breakfast, whatever, and she's just really hammering home to Jessel that she was really spoiled in the way that she was just constantly complaining about the lingerie, and that she wasn't really aware of like how offensive her comments were to Jenna, who was just trying to do something nice. And then one of the other things that we have happen, I think, right before this breakfast or lunch event, we have Jenna who is with the girls, and at some point, one of the nights that they're there, she actually ends up leaving, and she goes to her own house to sleep. She doesn't say bye to anyone. She goes to her house to sleep, and I think it's because she has to get up early the next morning to do something for work. And then obviously at this point that she's leaving, there's just a lot of energy and chaoticness going on, and so I don't think she thought that she would be able to sleep with all of that energy, so she went to her own house. And then when we see her coming back, I think the girls are talking about how she just left. Aaron's upset about it, and so they kind of like just grill her when she comes back about leaving and like how rude it was and blah blah blah. And so obviously Jenna is kind of not having a good girls trip in that aspect of just being seen as not wanting to like be part of the group or whatever. And so she's just having to deal with everyone coming at her for leaving. So then we get to that breakfast I was talking about where we have Sai kind of like going after and Aaron going after Joshua for a comment. We have Bryn also calling out Aaron for giving Jenna a pass for leaving early and not really saying anything. She's like quick to forgive Jenna. And then we have Bryn and Aaron who still have their beef over like the restaurant thing from before, and it feels like for Bryn that she's like being punished like worse than Jenna is being punished, and so she just doesn't really understand why the treatment is different in terms of both of them having done something to offend Aaron, but she's mad at one person more than the other, and so on. And so while we're also dealing with this trip, we have Bryn talking a lot about her upbringing. She is biracial. She does consider herself black. And one of the more powerful scenes of this season is her talking about just her upbringing in Indiana, being in an all-white community. And she talks about how when she was younger, she and her siblings, I guess they were like left alone, unattended for like days, and when they were found, they were like dirty, their diapers hadn't been changed and stuff like that. And so obviously, I don't know if she actually remembers those things, but she probably had family members tell her about those moments. And so obviously, that's going to be very traumatic to hear about how little you were cared for when you were younger and things like that. And so obviously, all of this still weighs very much on Bryn, and it was very brave of her to share these experiences that she has, because this is not something that everyone can relate to, but you can definitely have a lot of empathy for her and knowing that this is what she's been through. And part of what she talked about with being biracial was that she was raised by her white grandmother, who probably most likely didn't know how to do her hair. Her hair was more afro textured, and so she talked about how she started going to the black hair salon when she was younger, and how that was really her connection to the black community. Obviously, she was going somewhere where they could actually do her hair. She was spending hours there. She was learning different things from black women about the black experience, and she really talked about how this was very central or critical to her upbringing and allowing her to connect to her black side, if that makes sense. And so I was really glad that she shared those parts of her life with us on camera. So the next event that we have happening is that Jessel has some type of event at her house. I think it's sort of like a fashion type of thing. It's a who's who kind of the fashion world. And so at this event, we kind of know ahead of time that it's happening. We have Jenna at some point telling the group that she can't go because she has an event, and so the girls like give her a pass, but then they find out that she's actually just home hanging out with her son, and they get really upset that she kind of like lied about why she couldn't come to Jessel's event. And what was really weird about it is that obviously a theme of this season is that the women reveal a lot more in their confessionals than they reveal with the group. And so Jenna had a son. She has, I guess, like joint custody of her son, and he goes back and forth between her and his father until she doesn't always have him. And so when she does have him, she's obviously going to want to spend that time with him. She's not going to want to miss a night with him to go to some event for however long just because she's filming the show. And so I thought that the girls could have given her more grace with that, just because they're all mothers. They should know, with the exception of Bryn, they should kind of know how that feels to be a mom and wanting to spend all of your time with your kid, especially when they realized that she was home spending time with her son. And so we have at this event, we have the girls kind of just really kind of ganging up on Jenna and just not liking the fact that she basically didn't want to come to this event, and then they're just going off on her. And then we also have Brand, who's kind of like fangirling over someone who is attending this event, and so that kind of lets you know kind of like how legit this event is. So I just thought that that was really interesting because you kind of never really know who's gonna pop up on an episode, and so I thought that that was a real boss move from Jessel to kind of have this event on camera and have influential people in the world that she's part of at her event and on the show. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is Jessel and Pavitt. So what we know about them is that they're married. They were roommates at first. They weren't initially dating when they first met, and then somehow they just sort of got together. They've been married. They've gone through obviously IVF, 5 rounds of it. They have twins. There was a lot of talk. I did read some articles about Jessel and was talking about how she was cast for Real Housewives of Dallas first, and then she joined the New York reboot, and so obviously there was just some talk about where she actually lived, and they went into this and the reunion a little bit deeper. But anyway, so she lives in New York. She has her mom there to help with the kids, and we're really just seeing a lot of their home life. And so one of the things that they talk about is where they want their kids to go to school, and I thought that this was a really ridiculous conversation. But obviously, where Jessel is coming from is that she wants her kids to basically rub shoulders with influential people, with influential kids and stuff like that, and just really have a strong social circle. And so she's really thinking about where she wants her kids to go to school. Obviously, expense is no concern, but you should at least have some type of budget for how much you're willing to spend on an education for people who are basically not even in elementary school yet. They're just in preschool or whatever. And so one of the things that comes up is that they're basically willing to spend $62,000 a year on school. And so you have Pavitt really coming in and talking about this and how he's just saying, like, that's a lot for them to just be coloring and them to not even speak English, because Jessel is really happy about the fact that they have one school that they're looking at has campuses in multiple countries, and so she's like, they can learn Mandarin, and he's like, they don't even speak English, what are you talking about? And so it's just really funny to see them having that conversation, because I myself did go to private school, but I wasn't really part of the conversation as far as what my parents were willing to spend as far as what school I went to. But here in New York, it's a different level. You have parents who are spending up to $100,000 per year just for one kid to go to one school for a year, and so that's just really crazy. But it also speaks to kind of like the social pressure for the parents and the kids of where their kid is going to school, and then just the social circles that they're running into. And so one of the celebrities that I think Jessel mentioned was Tom Cruise. So obviously I think they were looking at a school that Sherry Cruise went to, and she was trying to influence him in one direction, or picking one school just because of the celebrities whose kids went to those schools. And so I just thought that that was a really interesting conversation. I'm glad that they had that on camera, because I don't know that that's something that the average person really thinks about, especially if your kids are going to public school. So the next thing we have happening is Erin's 10-year anniversary party. So she has this party at a old bank. It's not functioning as a bank any longer, I think, but really tall ceilings, a really historical location. And so one of the things that the girls were talking about for this party was how on the invite there were a bunch of sponsors listed at the bottom, and so they just thought that it was really weird that her anniversary party was sponsored. Obviously, if you can get people to pay for things, but you don't have to pay for everything out of pocket, I think that that makes a lot of sense. But they were just making fun of the fact that she did have sponsors for such a personal party. And so one of the moments that I love to see was that Uba, I don't know how she did this, but she took Erin to like a really popular, famous jeweler in the city, who basically allowed Aaron to basically rent or loan out really expensive pieces of items. And so what happened was that when they actually got to the party, there was somebody like a security guard with the items that Aaron would be wearing, and he basically followed her around all night just to make sure that she didn't lose anything. And so I thought that that was really big of Uber to do that, because I don't even know like what the consequences of Aaron losing anything would have been. Aaron have to pay? Did Uber have to pay like a down deposit for Aaron to even be able to rent the items, whatever? And so obviously they didn't go into much detail, but I thought that that was a huge flex from Uber to even just be able to kind of like gift that to her, even though it wasn't like something that she could actually keep. And so at this party, we have everyone coming. We have Bryn, who is wearing sunglasses. She's flirting with everyone. She's being loud and stuff like that. She's being her usual self. And so then we have Bryn having an interaction with Abe at one point, and she's kind of like joking with him about basically choosing her over Aaron, like, hey, when you get a divorce, come find me. I'm gonna be single, whatever. And oh, your marriage isn't legitimate because you didn't say your vows, and so technically you're really single and stuff like that. And obviously they were both like laughing at the comments, and then Abe was giving her jokes right back and stuff like that. And so it wasn't anything that was super offensive. And if you know Bryn by this point, you know that she's flirting with him because that's like her personality. If that makes sense, she's not actually trying to get with him. And so I thought that that was funny. And then obviously, being that this is a anniversary party, we did have a lot of people speaking about the couple, and some of them spoke for a really long time. And so the girls were getting really annoyed by this, just the fact that there was so much talking, they had to listen to everything. And then we also had Aaron and Abe exchanging their own vows and stuff like that. And so at some point, the girls just get really loud. They're just talking loudly that everyone else can hear them. And so we have Aaron's sister coming over, and she just really goes off on the girls in a kind of like nice, polite way, but she's very direct and letting the girls know that they're too loud, they need to be quiet, they need to listen. And then I thought it was funny because after the exchange happened, you have Aaron's mom coming over and trying to introduce herself to the girls, and then they're like, oh no, we have to be quiet because we're being too loud. And so I just thought that that was funny. But at one point, we have the next day we have Erin kind of like talking about the party, and she's talking about how they noticed that there were some people who were being really loud, and then she finds out that it was the girls supposedly who were loud during the actual vow exchange between Erin and Abe. And I don't know for sure that it was the girls, but I do remember when she had started speaking, she had told the crowd to be quiet and stuff like that. And so she's just talking about, I guess, basically how rude the girls were at the party. And then one other thing that happened at the party was that Sai ended up leaving early. So we have this moment where Sai and the girls are talking, they're hungry, they want to go get food. And then we have Erin coming over after she has exchanged her vows. And she's like, hey, I'm gonna do an outfit change, don't go anywhere, I'll be right back. And so then we see the girls, and we see Sai leaving, but we also see the girls. And so it feels like Sai just missed Aaron. I'm not really sure, but eventually Aaron found out that Sai left and left without saying goodbye, and so she was really upset about that. And then we just saw the little aftermath of that, and just Aaron not being happy that Sai did that when she was just mad at Jenna for doing the same thing. And so that obviously continues to play out throughout the rest of the season. So one thing that also happens during the season is that we finally see a conversation between Jessel and her mom. And so as I mentioned earlier, I kind of already gave you the backstory of this, but Jessel didn't share with her mom that she did IVF. And so she did tell her mom in this one-on-one kind of like lunch dinner setting, and her mom reacted really well. I wasn't sure if she thought that her mom is going to be mad at her for doing IVF or like having to even do that, but her mom seemed really supportive and everything with that conversation. So I was really surprised because, again, I didn't really know what Jessel kind of like expected as far as her mom's reaction, but it was just really good to see that that conversation went well, especially being that it was on camera. So the next thing I want to talk about is Bryn. So she is having basically a wreath event where they are basically making their own wreaths. She does have some food that Sai is not happy about. She's complaining about the avocado being brown and all of this stuff. And then we have Erin coming late to the event, and she just immediately goes for Sai and Bryn. She is upset with Sai for leaving early. Sai doesn't care. In a lot of the conflicts, we do have Sai having to deal with someone's emotions about something that she's done, and her reaction has been that she doesn't care, and it's kind of like really cold to see that reaction from somebody. But when we get to the reunion, she kind of sees how this looks on camera, and she does apologize for it. But in the moment, it's just really kind of very flippant and cold, and just not a good feeling for someone to have when you're expressing yourself to someone else and they don't care. And so then Erin goes to Bryn, and she's, telling Bryn all of the stuff that she said that she didn't find acceptable, especially since it was at her anniversary party. And then Bryn's big thing is that she didn't say the divorce word, the D word, and she actually did. She even alluded to it in, or she referenced divorce in different terms, so like separated, child separation, and then maybe something else. And so she did make comments about A being single, being divorced, not being with Anne and stuff like that. But in this moment, when Anne was confronting her, she wasn't really willing to take ownership of the things that she said. She wasn't really willing to accept that her comments, even if they were flirty, even if she had no real even if there's no real meaning behind them, she didn't take ownership for the fact that she really shouldn't have said any of this at the anniversary party. Then the other thing that happened at this wreath event is that we have Sai calling out Jenna for giving sponsored gifts, and so and Jenna explains this in the confessionals or in the reunion, I think, but basically she gets a lot of stuff sent to her, and she had extras left over. And so she talked about how she would have people come to her house, and how people would be like, oh, I want that. Where can I get it? Blah blah blah. But it was something. By the point that she was giving some of this stuff to the girls, it wasn't stuff that they could buy anymore. And so she really just had a lot of leftover stuff, wanted to get rid of it, wanted to give it to someone else, and she was giving it to these girls. And so one of the things that they brought up was that they felt like this was not like a genuine act from Jenna. They felt like she was doing this for the purpose of them turning around and then kind of like posting about it on social media so that Jenna's name could get out there because they had that stuff. And so I didn't fully agree with that as far as her doing it for clout or whatever, but I do think that she did just genuinely want to give the girl something. And is if it's stuff that's sitting around and it's good quality stuff that you think other people would want, there shouldn't be any reason why you can't gift those items. So yeah, so I don't really think that Jenna was doing anything wrong by giving the girls these gifts. They didn't have to post about them online if they didn't want to. So the next event that I want to talk about is Jenna and Quilla. So this is another group trip. So I'm really annoyed by how this situation played out because we have Jenna, she's really transparent, and she's talking to us about these different medical issues that she has. So she has some type of skin condition that basically affects the pigment of her skin, and she's really self-conscious about it. I think she also has another condition where her teeth, something has happened to her teeth, so the teeth that she has in her mouth are not her own, and so she has to have dental work to like put these implants in and stuff like that. And so I think she's having some type of dental procedure. And so Erin comes to visit her. She brings her soup. And while the girls are talking, she's telling Erin about her skin condition and how she feels about it. She's also, telling her that she wants to go ahead of the girls because she doesn't want to fly coach. She wants to fly business class. She wants to be comfortable. She wants to go down at early so that she can tan and just really feel comfortable around the group when the rest of the girls finally get there. And so what was super annoying about this moment is because Jenna was being very vulnerable with Erin and sharing this information with her. It obviously wasn't just like a 10-minute conversation that we saw on camera. It could have been a much longer conversation. And so what I didn't like was that Erin used that moment to gossip to the girls and kind of say that Jenna was basically putting everyone down and saying that she was better than everyone because she didn't want to fly coach and she was going to fly first class and all of that stuff. And so Anne really kind of riled up the girls so that they would kind of not like Jenna even more just because of the fact that Jenna is what they perceive to be isolating herself. So they said that they got mad when she left in the Hamptons to go back to her own house and then came back the next morning, and then now they're getting mad at her because she's flying ahead of the group in better seating conditions or whatever, and then meeting up with the girls when the rest of them get there. And so they weren't happy about this, and I think that the way that Anne shared the story kind of made the situation a bigger deal than it needed to be. And so, as a result of this, they gave Jenna the worst room, and I think once she realized the rooms that the other girls were staying in, she realized that they were intentionally putting her in the worst room, and so that wasn't really a good feeling for her to have, especially when you consider that she hadn't really been on girls' trips. She hadn't been around girl energy in this way, and then also her experiencing two different situations where she's basically being bullied and attacked for decisions that she's made that have to do with her personal comfort. And so I thought that the girls could have done a much better job of understanding where she was coming from. So the next thing that we have happening while they are on this trip in Anguilla, we have Erin pushing Uba in the pool. And so obviously when you push someone in the pool, it really depends on the person that you're pushing in the pool. Is this someone who doesn't mind getting wet? Is this someone who can't swim? And all of these things that you should be considering before you push someone in the pool. And so obviously Erin, she reacted well to being pushed in the pool, and she definitely wanted to get Uba back for doing that. But this obviously led to a much bigger blow up over time as the rest of the season plays out. And so what we have happening is that Uba, she's kind of freaking out about eventually being pushed back into the pool by Erin, and so she's just kind of on edge about when is this gonna happen. She's worried about her hair and stuff like that. And so then we have this moment where the girls are at the pool, and we have Sai who ends up pushing Uba in the pool. And so Anne's like, that's my B, whatever, but she doesn't consider that her revenge because she wasn't the one who pushed Uba. And so I think the same night, maybe at some point, the girls are coming back from somewhere, and we have them getting out of the car, and we have someone saying, Uba, your phone. And I guess Uba's far ahead of the group, and so she doesn't hear it. And so Erin has her phone, and so Erin is keeping her phone as a joke just because she feels like this is gonna be her getting even with Uba. And so we have that happening, and then we also have Uba eventually realizing that her phone is gone. We can see her on camera kind of like looking around for her phone. I have no idea how much time passed between her realizing that her phone was gone and then her actually getting her phone back. And so we see that Uba had text the group via Jessel's phone like, hey, I lost my phone, has anyone seen it? And then we see that Erin has responded, but she's just responded in emojis. And so she doesn't explicitly say, I have Uber's phone. And so one of the things that led to a lot of confusion over this is because we're seeing this moment playing out, but we are also seeing confessionals kind of like explaining what happened. And so I think what happens is we have them seeing like the messages from Erin, not really understanding what it meant, and then we have Sai who knows that Erin has the phone, telling Jessica like Erin had it go upstairs, and so in Erin's mind, she's thinking that the girls figured out what her emojis mean, and that's why they came to get the phone. And so it isn't until the reunion when you see the girls like, no, we didn't know what that meant, and then Sai admits that she actually told them to go up there, and that's why they went up there. It wasn't because they were able to figure out what her emojis meant. And I can definitely understand where Uba is coming from with this because obviously, and she explains it in her confessionals that she's a single woman, she's traveling the world, her family worries about her, and she has this agreement with her family to contact them at night and then also contact them in the morning to let them know that she's alright. So if she doesn't have her phone, she's not able to do any of these things, and she doesn't want to worry her family. And so none of the girls really like understand this, and then we have Aaron, thinking it's not really a big deal. You have Jessel telling Aaron, like, hey, she doesn't find this funny, she's really upset. And so they're just not really understanding the severity of the situation as far as how this is affecting Uba. And so we have the girls who are getting ready to go out for an outing. Uba isn't talking to Aaron, she isn't acknowledging Aaron, and then she's kind of being rude to Sai. And so Aaron at some point leaves to go get something, and then she comes back to the front door and she hears Uba saying her name, and this triggers her. She gets mad, tells Uba to stop saying her name, and then she ends up getting into like a argument with Uba, and Uba ends up taking her glasses off of her face and she won't give them back. She says that she's going to keep them for 45 minutes because that's how long her phone was gone, and so on. And so you really have a lot of conflict between the girls at this point because you have Uba going off on everyone who agrees with Anne. She's relentlessly kind of going after Anne, calling her out on different things that she's done, how she's a liar, how she talks bad about everyone in the group. And so this is a really intense moment for Anne because she's not really understanding where all of this is coming from because she just sees this as a innocent joke that has been blown out of proportion. So we have Uba kind of like outing all of the different things that Anne has said about people, and at one point she had said that Bryn was a social climber, and so this is just not a good moment for Aaron to be in. And then while we have this conflict with Uba happening, we have Jessel revealing that she doesn't understand like what's going on with her and Aaron, and so she's kind of taking notes of the different things that Aaron has done to upset her, and she's kind of like ranting about it and like I guess like a little the notes app or a little journal or whatever, and so she's reading out her notes to the girls, and it's just funny because the way she was reading it was funny, but it was more like a journal entry, and it wasn't like one line zingers, if that makes sense. And so I just thought it was funny that she was just keeping notes of that and just kind of keeping track of like how someone was making her feel and the emotions that she was feeling, and kind of using that as her guide of how to like continue to interact with that person going forward. The next thing we have happening is that the gang gets together at the Swingers Golf Club. We have Pavitz, we have David, and then we have Abe there at the event, and we have Jessel and Sai kind of like continuing their conversation. I think previously they had gotten together to kind of really discuss Jessel feeling like tension from Sai. So when they were in Anguilla, Jessa had tried to like share her family story with the group, and the group just really didn't understand where she was coming from. They thought she was talking in circles. They thought she kept talking about her parents instead of talking about herself, and so they really just weren't vibing with Jessel. They felt like she was trying to compare her stories or make it seem like her stories were just as bad as what the other girls had been through. Obviously, we know that Bryn has dealt with like neglect from her parents and stuff like that. We know that Sai has had a rough upbringing as far as her mom being an alcoholic and having to really provide for herself at a young age. And then we have Uba coming from Africa and just dealing with the stuff that she was dealing with there. And so Jessel is kind of the odd one out in the sense that her story is not as bad as the rest of the girls. And so obviously that's going to be awkward. You do have other people telling you their sob stories, their sad stories, and then you just come in with like, oh, my life was easy, everything was perfect, then I had struggles, but my struggles weren't as bad. So obviously that's an awkward place to be in. And then when you're forced to share your story, I feel like you don't really know what to share because you don't want to seem like you just have this privileged life and you're kind of like oblivious to what other people are going through. So I definitely think that Jessel had a rough time with the group as far as what she did share about her story and stuff like that. She talked about like her uncle and how he had alcoholism, and then she talked about how her parents didn't support her when she came from London, and how she had an internship, she wasn't making any money, she just had $20 in her bank account and stuff like that. And I feel like it was more so the other girls making it a comparison because they didn't like the fact that they shared something so deep and so raw that affected them when they were younger. But then you have Joshua coming in with these stories that are kind of not necessarily perfect, but they're much more like positive stories. And so I feel like it was the girls comparing stories more than it was Joshua. And so we have Joshua and Sai getting together, and Joshua really just kind of wants to clear the air. She just wants to kind of let Sai know that she wasn't comparing, that she's not trying to make it seem like her life was just as bad as other girls and stuff like that. And Sai at this point, she doesn't care. Jessica was like 40 minutes late, 45 minutes late, so she's annoyed about that. And then she's annoyed when Jessica brings up her mom and her death and how she had an uncle who died from alcoholism as well. And so at this point, Sai just runs out of the lunch date, and then they leave kind of like not on good terms. And so when they're at the swingers club, this conversation kind of picks back up, and we just really have the girls kind of like going at it again. We have Sai calling Joshua a liar because they're talking about Pavitt's trip to Vietnam, and he's doing this for a mileage run, and they're just talking about how shady that is. And then they're talking about how Joshua said that he was leaving next week, and then when they asked Pavitt about it, he said, "Oh, I'm not leaving for a few more weeks," or something like that. And so when they played back what Joshua actually said, she said a couple of weeks. She didn't say next week, and so I wasn't really sure if there was another conversation that they had that they just didn't have on camera, or if it was that Sai was misremembering what Joshua actually said. And so we have that playing out, and then we have kind of like Joshua just feeling like she's being attacked by Sai and Aaron, and she's just not really able to get on good terms with the girls. And so she calls Aaron Sai's pet parrot, which is really funny. And in this particular moment, Aaron wasn't really chiming in, but she was making side comments to Uber about the conversation that Joshua and Sai were having. And so in her own way, she was kind of like playing with the situation, if that makes sense. And the last thing I want to talk about is the reunion. So I talked about this earlier, but we kind of had this moment where all of the cast members, they realized that people are a lot more transparent in their confessionals about what they were going through. They gave a lot more detail, and so when they all like watched the show back, they were able to get the context that they didn't have in real time just because everyone wasn't really transparent. And I thought that that was interesting because you do have like people like Uber and Aaron who say that they're the closest to each other on the cast, and so you still have these moments of them not really fully knowing the full picture. And you would think that for two people who were really close, that they would know those details about each other. And so I thought that that was interesting that they didn't know the things that they needed to know about each other, and in turn that affected how they interacted with each other, how they perceived each other, and hopefully going into the next season they kind of bridge those gaps a little bit better. And then kind of like one of the things I want to talk about that there was more transparency about in the confessional was obviously Jessica's struggles with IVF that we mentioned, then Jenna's skin condition. So when the episode aired with Jenna like flying ahead and then Aaron kind of telling the other girls why she flew ahead, we see that Jenna tells Andy that she texted Aaron so that that didn't feel good, and Aaron apologized, and then Aaron even said, I didn't realize that it was that bad, and then once I realized, I felt bad and I apologized and stuff like that. And so it was good to see them kind of have those moments of reflection where they realized that they kind of did something with, or they reacted a certain way without having the full picture. In the reunion, one of the things that I love that they pointed out was that Jenna wore jeans, and so obviously when the Real Housewives first premiered, you kind of had everyone looking more basic. They were still dressed up, but it was a much more relaxed style than what it is now. Here you have everyone really showing up for the reunion. They're wearing designer clothes, they're wearing almost like couture items, stuff that you wouldn't really wear in the real world and stuff like that. And so to see Jenna just come in her jeans and her blazer and stuff like that, it was just true to who she was. And I thought that it was great that she kept that energy, because throughout the season she talked about how she didn't really dress for the male gaze anymore. She dressed the way that she wanted to dress and stuff like that. And so I think that it was good that she stuck to that, even in something like the reunion where the girls are known to get really, really dressed up and dolled up. One of the things that they did talk about in terms of Jenna that I didn't like was we had Erin revealing that the girls didn't want her on the show, so they actually clarified what they meant by that, and they were just saying they didn't think that she was going to fit in. Obviously, she's much older than the girls, and so that she's just going to be in different energy because of that. And so I'm glad that they were able to clear that up, because the way that Uba delivered it, it just really seemed like the other three girls didn't like her. And so obviously with Jenna not having been in a situation like this before, I can see something like that turning her off from wanting to have a group of girlfriends again, because she didn't have like the best experience. She didn't have like the worst experience, but she had a lot of really, really bad moments because of how other people were treating her throughout this season. And so I'm glad that they clarified what they meant by that. One other thing that did annoy me in the reunion was how they were talking about was how they were saying that they knew that Jenna was this powerful woman, this boss woman, and they just didn't like that she didn't have a lot of confidence in herself and stuff like that. And so that's always annoyed me, because you can't force someone else to have confidence, but you also can't try to drag them down or bring them down because they aren't confident about something. And so I've always hated when people point that out, because it just feels like it feels like it's doing more harm than good by telling someone, oh, you need to be more confident, and especially in the way that they're doing it, where they have basically made fun of her all season. You know what I mean? So you having made fun of me and then telling me to be more confident doesn't really go hand in hand in my opinion. And so the next thing I want to get into is Uba. And so Uba is super upset going to the reunion. She's kind of like putting everyone on blast. She's spilling beans again about them not wanting Jenna on the show. She's really going after Anne. And one thing I found really weird in the reunions is when they have a conflict and they're discussing the conflict and the women are really heated, they're really angry. But then when Andy says, okay, well, where do you guys go from here? How are you guys now? And they're like, oh, we're fine. We're hanging out and blah, blah, blah. And so it's just a really weird shift in energy for them to go back into the mind frame that they were in when the actual conflict happened, and then just quickly transition to where they are now, where they're actually on good terms with each other. And so I always found that weird, and they did that in this reunion, and I just thought that was interesting. And then one other thing that I was really glad to see in the reunion is that we did see Sai apologize. Obviously, just seeing the season back and watching it back, he saw how she came off on camera as far as how she was talking about people, especially how she was talking about Jessel and Pavitt's marriage and flying to Vietnam, the mileage run, and kind of like talking about how if he's going to Vietnam and they're not intimate, he's obviously cheating and stuff like that. And so she realized that one, she should like stay out of people's marriages, and then she should also kind of like listen more and try to really hear where people are coming from, and to not be so cold and dismissive of what other people are sharing with her. And so he did man up or woman up and apologize for how she came off in that aspect. And I thought that that was really good that she was willing to self-reflect like that. And we also saw Sai open up a little bit more. I had seen clips online or whatever, because I didn't watch the reunion right when it aired, of how people were criticizing David for how he made her kick her mom out. And so Sai shares that her mom was an alcoholic, and at some point she was living with Sai, her children, and David, and she was just drinking and stuff like that. And at some point she had to be kicked out of the house, and so she just felt really bad for the fact that she was living a really good secured life or whatever, and her mom was out on the street and her mom couldn't live with her. And so she just felt really sad about that, especially because not too long after being kicked out, her mother died from the disease that she had. And so obviously that's a lot of guilt and grief that she carries with her. but I also really appreciate her for being transparent about that, because it is difficult when you have people who make it in life and then they have family members who are still struggling, and they're just really having to bridge that gap between them as far as how much help do you give and when do you say enough, and how you deal with that when you kind of come to the end of the rope as far as what you're willing to do and what you can do for someone. And so I was really glad to see her share that part of her story. And then obviously one of the other major things that came out in this reunion was them talking about Erin a lot, and just kind of like how she kind of started a lot of the conflict with what she was saying about people. We have her comments about Brynn, we have her comments about Jessel, we have her comments about Uber, and so she's just really and Jenna even, she's just really kind of saying too much, even though she's saying what she's thinking, which is fine, she can think whatever she wants, but she's just really saying things, and she perceives herself as just kind of like stating the obvious, but she's also doing it in a way that's shady and is going to make people react in a very strong way to whatever she's saying. And so I think that was good for her to kind of also self-reflect and realize that she's kind of saying too much, and the way that she's coming across isn't the way that she is intending to, and so she has to make some changes there. And so obviously we had a lot of good stuff from everyone in the reunion. I didn't really talk about Brynn much in the reunion, but I did think that she kind of like really kind of spoke up at the reunion as far as advocating for herself, telling Jessel to advocate for herself, and then also kind of taking on Uber as far as kind of like trying to rein Uber in, because Uber was just going off, and then her and Brynn were getting into it as far as kind of like just the things that Uber was saying and just like her energy, and Brynn wasn't here for her and she had no problem calling her out. One of the cool things that Brynn did share was that and I didn't talk about this prior to going into the recap, but I'm going to talk about it now. And so one of the last things that we see before the reunion is Brynn's birthday party, and so she has kind of basically like a masquerade ball. She has everyone come with a mask, and at her birthday party, we prior to Brynn's birthday party, we learned from Sai and Uber's conversation at Swingers that Uber was seeing someone who was in Connecticut, and she wasn't ready to share that information with the group. And so we have her telling Sai, and then we go to Sai and Erin getting together. And at the Swingers Club, we have David kind of asking Uber like, "Hey, why are you single? What's going on?" And you can tell from the way that he's asking that he's like complimenting Uber. He's saying, you're amazing, basically. Why are you single? And so I guess Erin and Uber had a conversation, and Uber didn't like that question. She was just offended by it, like you wouldn't ask a man that question. And so when Erin and Sai got together, Erin is telling Sai that she was offended by David's question, whatever. Sai is defending David and blah blah blah, and then she's just like, well, she shouldn't be that bothered by the question, basically, because she's not single, she is dating someone. And so you have Sai breaking Uber's trust and spilling the beans that she's dating someone, and then you find out in the confessionals or maybe at the reunion that they had a private conversation with Brynn and Sai, and they were going more into detail about who Uber was dating, and they weren't supposed to share that information with anyone else. And so at Brynn's birthday party, she said, "Hey, Uber, I hear you're dating someone in Connecticut." And so Sai goes off on Brynn for that. She gets really upset. She's mad that Brynn is sharing someone else's personal business, telling their personal story. And I thought that was really confusing, because Sai was the one who broke Uber's trust first. Even if it was an accident, she still told someone else something that she wasn't supposed to tell them, and then she went and told another person, and then she expected all of that to be kept quiet. And so I thought that her anger was misplaced in that moment, because she was the one who started all of it, basically by telling Uber's business to Erin and then eventually telling Brynn. And so Brynn's whole thing was that she didn't know that she wasn't supposed to say where the guy worked, that he worked in Connecticut. And so I think that was the big thing that she said, where the guy actually lived or where he worked or whatever. And so in the reunion, when Brynn is talking about her conflict with Sai, she reveals that they really hadn't spoken since that night because Sai was so upset with Brynn for what she did. And so I'm really glad that in the reunion that Sai took ownership of the fact that she was the one who was in the wrong, and that she basically took it out on Brynn for something that she caused. And so it was really sad to hear that they hadn't spoken in like 6 months because of that, because that was, in my opinion, a very silly reason to be upset with each other, especially since we kind of like all knew that it was Sai's fault. And so they were kind of able to wrap that situation up. I don't think it was on a good term, but it was good to kind of like get some resolution on that conflict that they had. And so one thing I do want to mention to wrap up this video is that I actually did really enjoy this new cast. I know that there was a lot of talk about them, as I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, but I'm the type of person who likes to binge watch. And so at first I was watching it episode by episode, and then like maybe after episode 5 I stopped watching, and then I binge watched the rest of the episode and the reunion. And so I felt like I got a better flow of like the different relationships, the girls, and all of that. And so I think that it made this new season more enjoyable for me. I've also been watching other Real Housewives shows, so like Real Housewives of Dubai. And so obviously that's a brand new cast, and so you kind of have to be willing to learn new people and kind of get into the storyline and the season. And so I think if you have that same approach with this new cast for Real Housewives of New York, I think that you will like the new cast a lot more if you're just a little bit more open-minded, because with the old cast you kind of already knew who they were, you were familiar with their habits, their thought processes, and the things that they did, and so you kind of didn't have to put that much energy into watching all of the seasons that followed. But now with this cast, you're kind of like starting over again. And I think for some people, that is the hump that they have to get over. But once you get over it, I feel like you will actually enjoy this season. And then this cast will do what the other legacy cast did, and kind of build and add more seasons to that, and then you'll get to a place where you feel like you know this cast just as well as the old cast, and you like them not more than the old cast, but you like them just as much. And so I really appreciated them doing this reboot. To wrap up this episode, I covered a lot, but I hope that you guys enjoyed me kind of like recapping everything that happened in this season 14 of Real Housewives of New York, and I also hope that you appreciated the insight that I shared. And if you haven't watched this season yet, I definitely recommend going to at least watch the reunion. If you don't want to watch all of the episodes, I really appreciated watching the reunion when I did, because I actually watched it on Peacock, so I got the uncensored version. And obviously it was really, really long, like it was 2 parts, but because it was uncensored, there's like extra content that I normally don't get because I watch it live, and it's just like an hour episode, and it's like 2 parts, so that's 2 hours. This was like almost 3 hours. I feel like it was really, really long, but I'm really glad that I was able to watch the uncensored, because if I watched the reunions when it aired, I'm not gonna go and watch it a second time just to get the uncensored content or whatever. And so this was just a good experience to watch it, and I'm not sure if I'm gonna be watching future reunions that way, but it was a good experience. And so yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up this video. Thank you guys for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.